we good to go? Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ed Selich, President of Speak Up Newport, and welcome to our 11th Zoom webinar. We started these last April when the pandemic started, and we really didn't think that here we would be 11 months later still doing them, but here we are. Normally in February, we do the annual Mayor's Dinner, and this year, because of the pandemic, we've decided to postpone the dinner till later this year. But we did want to go ahead and have our State of the City address, where we have the new Mayor of Newport Beach come and tell us about his goals and for the city and vision for the future. And we're fortunate today that we have Brad Avery, our new mayor, with us. Brad and I discussed how we were going to do the format, since this has never been done before for the State of the City. So we decided that we would do a talk show kind of format, a little bit of Q&A. I made Brad aware of some of the questions I'm going to ask him, not all of them. So Brad, there'll be maybe a surprise or two here for you.
Thank you, Ed.
But I have to keep you on your toes. But maybe to get started, Brad, a lot of people see you as kind of like a fatherly figure on the council dais. And so why don't you tell us a little bit about your personal life, about yourself, being raised in Newport, your career, interests, things like that.
Sure. Well, thank you for setting all this up and Speak Up Newport to just making this happen and, do what we've all been doing this last year, is figuring out a new way to do things. But my father was born in LA and went to SC because he lived a few blocks away on Western Avenue, and that was the place he went after LA High. And he went into the war, and he got out of the war, World War II, and he a few years later bought a sailboat, and he kept it down here in Newport. So at that time, my family was out in Pasadena, and would drive every weekend since when I can remember. I was just a couple years old, down in Newport to Balboa Yacht Club and get on the boat, go sailing. And so I grew up sailing, and it sort of stuck with me. My other two brothers headed for the hills. And so my life has really been about, my recreational side has been about boats and sailing. And so what better place for that than Newport Harbor? And so I really learned to love the harbor first. And I was just on it all the time as a kid. And I'd get out of school and go sailing, that kind of thing. So, and then I graduated from Harbor High, but my family lived in Laguna Beach for about 4 years. So I went to school down there, transferred to Harbor High. And from there, I took off and went sailing as a professional on big sailboats, kind of all over the world for 3 years, and came back and went to college, went to OCC, transferred to USC, got a degree in journalism and communications from Annenberg, and then sometime later got a degree in public administration, a master's degree from Cal State Long Beach. And so I had really no desire to at least I thought at the time, go into politics or be a part of city government. But the program in Long Beach did inform me sort of what that was about, and sort of gave me a new awakening as toward public service, which I thought was great. Then I went to work for Orange Coast College, and I just retired after 40 years of working, running the Marine program there, the sailing program, and it's grown over time. And that's been a terrific experience as well. But prior to retiring, 6 or 7 years ago, longer now, got on the Harbor Commission. And I just had some thoughts about the harbor, and I decided I'd apply. And I think it took me 2 times to get my application accepted. So, and I really enjoyed that experience. And then I knew Duffy Duffield, and he encouraged me to run when Tony Petros decided he wasn't going to run for a second term. And I actually won my race against someone who didn't really compete. So, and then it started with council, and I've really enjoyed the experience. It's a funny thing about, people say to you, oh, you must hate that. And it's really perplexing. They go, I'm just glad you're doing it because I would never want to do it. And I say to people, you have no idea. It's absolutely engaging on all levels. Learning how the city works, learning how staff works, and just the complexity of it is really something. And then the element of people coming together to get their issues taken care of, dealing with that, it's also just hugely engaging. So it's something at this point in my life to be involved like this for me, and now to be retired and be able to put more time to it, it's even better.
So you've lived here longer than I have. I moved here right after I got out of college, and so you've seen a lot more changes to the city than I've seen. So what changes have you seen over the years in the city, and have they made them better or worse in your opinion?
Well, one of the things that got me was when they tore the China House down. And I think Nancy Gardner mentioned that in one of her pieces, but that really stuck with me because I just thought that was an iconic thing that would be somehow saved. And certainly the town has changed, and it's gotten there's more intensity, there's more build, all the rest of it. And my thinking has been over the years changed because I've come to understand that this city is a city of builders. It's literally a city of builders. There's so many people who live here who've made their living, and in some cases their fortune in home building, commercial building, and the rest of it. And I also see it as a city of builders from the standpoint of we've just got a very active population, and it's an aspirational city, and people who come here are generally successful, and it really just kind of coalesces in a lot of input to the city's future and to frankly to growth. So I don't see growth as a bad thing, but it can be if it's not managed and it's not done in a rational way and in a way that produces sort of what I like to call human scale design, and places that we want to visit, homes that we want to live in, neighborhoods we want to live in. And Newport's just done an incredible job of that, over time. When I say Newport, I'm really talking about the residents. We have so many stories of residents who were leaders in their communities, in their villages, and made things happen. So it's a long answer to your question. Every time something gets torn down, I kind of, when they tore down the sheds that were part of the shipbuilding operation there for the view apartments and condos, that was kind of tough to see. But the city is just moves on. Newport Beach is not a city that sort of is staying in place in any way. It is just moving and, in my view, getting better all the time. But with that getting better, there's more intensity, there's more folks, traffic, circulations are issues. Those are all things that we need to work hard to mitigate as we grow.
So you had mentioned that some folks had questioned why you were on the city council, and did you really enjoy it? But what actually motivated you to run for city council? What gave you the motivation to actually run for the city council?
Well, watching council a little bit, I became aware that it wasn't always, it was kind of a rough patch before I arrived on council, and it really made me hesitate. But I think I was mostly informed by my experience on the Harbor Commission. I really enjoyed it. And so I was introduced to council at that point. And obviously all our things went up to council, and occasionally council would kick something back to us or take our decision in another direction. And I would get sort of like, wow, that's pretty wild. We sign up for this, we recommend this, and it goes another direction. So I just thought that it would be really interesting, I don't like to use the word enjoyable because a lot of times it's really not enjoyable in the moment, but it's interesting, and it just adds greatly to my perception of things and my whole outlook on city government has really changed because the things aren't easy, decisions aren't easy, and we just need to embrace that and try to do the best job we can. And we just need to respond to our constituents' needs and try to do everything we can to preserve the city's assets and just provide a place where families call home that they love. And I've told people in other ways, it's very simple, right? It's about just, number one rule is hang on to what you've got. And by that I mean, don't make mistakes, keep things maintained. I mean, when people say, what's your main, goal for the year? Well, there's a lot of projects I'd like to see moved forward, completed, or on their way. But my main goal is not to screw it up. But I also know that I'm just one person on council of 7. We have to work together. I'm no king. And as you know, Ed, the mayor is not really a powerful position. It's you can do certain things, but you've got to have your council with you. And the biggest job, I think, is fostering the councils working together and, everybody being respectful. And I think it's, for me, every council person brings something to the table, a unique perspective. And that's what we want to hear. It's just like we get it from the community, all these different perspectives. So I really enjoy the process. That's a long answer to that question.
Thank you. That's a good answer. So, the last year has been a tough year for everybody, and particularly for, I think, those of you serving on the city council. And COVID's wreaked havoc. It's on our businesses, our educational system, our residents, healthcare institutions all over the city. So how would you grade how the city's handled COVID, and what do you see your role as mayor in the coming year in dealing with COVID?
Well, I think the city, we've done a good job when you consider how it started. Will O'Neill was mayor, and I was mayor pro tem, and it was just like getting hit by a truck. We're off to the races. In January, February, there was mumbling. There was in the background, I hear the rumbling about COVID, and then when it hit, it just absolutely was. Put us in crisis mode, essentially. I mean, our businesses were just severely threatened, our public, and then we had, the whole mask issue and the closing the beaches or not, and all of this stuff hitting at once. It was really, really a challenge for council. And many of us felt differently about closing the beach or not. And, we're a free society, and also the idea that the state is pushing down on us in the federal government with mandates, but we're not seeing where we're going. We're not seeing the issues in our city sometimes. We're a unique city, and so things aren't tailored to what we were experiencing. And so I think we navigated it pretty well. Whether we should have closed the beaches or not. I mean, I think we made the right decision to not close the beaches because I think people really needed a spot to go. So could we have done more enforcement in terms of keeping people apart and maintaining separation on the beaches and elsewhere in our town? Could we have asked the police department to step up that sort of enforcement? And I think, for me anyway, I looked at it as there was so much stress out there. People were feeling so much stress. And I think it was really important not to overreact. And that's one thing I'll always say about our reaction in terms of our law enforcement was how well they did with the protests and with individuals, because I think they understand the pressure everybody was feeling, whether they were acknowledging it or not. But this was causing a lot of stress for everybody. And it was manifesting in many different ways. And people were coming to this town to kind of get out from under that stress, go to the beach, or, you know, just visit beautiful Newport Beach. So I think we did a very good job all the way through of sort of parsing it, and also at the same time not letting this national emergency hijack what we needed to do locally in terms of moving the city ahead, in terms of doing what we could to work the budget, to keep the necessary projects moving forward, you know, reduce our spending, you know, preserve our capital, and still provide as many services to residents as possible. So in the middle of all this, we're doing that. And so I think we did a good job on council of not letting council be hijacked by this in terms of doing our business, you know, which was just sort of basic business of council is really important. Just moving things through the system, you know, getting people their building permits, getting people what they need, all those things. I think we did a good job.
So, you know, one of the things that happened during COVID is a lot of businesses really got hurt pretty hard in town, and the city council came up with a grant and a loan program. How do you think that went?
Well, I think it went well. You know, not all businesses got their grants, got their loans. Some were more prepared. Some got to the table first, and so it wasn't, you know, it was equitable from the standpoint it was available to everyone. But you know, you get a small business and they've got to fill out the forms and go through the hoops, and they're just trying to survive. So maybe they don't get to the table soon enough. But overall, I think we did a good job. And you know, all of us, I mean, certainly all of us on council were absolutely committed to doing what we could for small business in terms of pursuing all that. And to, obviously, I think what our planning department did in terms of, you know, and other departments in terms of allowing businesses to get, you know, to move outside and do outside dining and take up parking, and working with each one individually was really important. So I think we were fortunate that we had very good weather all through the fall, and that really helped all through summer, all through fall. So I think we got as much to the businesses as we could, and did as much as we could to not get in the way of business, you know, in terms of this whole issue with the state versus the county, you know, two different viewpoints in terms of those governments. And again, we were just trying to, you know, focus on our town, our businesses, because that's what we're supposed to be doing. So again, I think that's another example of us just holding the course and not getting out on any political side of it, just going down the center and working for the city.
Okay. Well, recently, you know, the city council had a goal-setting meeting, and so why don't we talk about some of the items that came up in that? First of all, the city budget, that's always a big issue. We have potential service cuts, deferment of capital expenditures, dealing with pensions. All those were topics of discussion. So what can you tell us about the city budget status right now, and then what you see going into next fiscal year?
Well, right now, you know, Newport's very fortunate. I'll just start this compared to almost any other city, because we get so much from property tax. 50% of our budget is paid through property tax, and that historically is very steady and generally increases a few points every year or more. And that has been the case all the way through the pandemic. And so that has really shored us up. We've also been very fortunate in that our transient occupancy tax has suffered, but the property taxes have covered that, and our sales tax has been better than we expected. So the last budget cycle, after COVID hit, the finance committee solved for a $30 million reduction in the budget. We're anticipating those are the cuts that we would need to make to remain solvent. And that was done through, as most people who follow the city all know, it was done through delaying capital projects, roads, sewers, ordered these projects, and but ultimately came out with a budget instead of 200 million, it was 170 million. So and that allowed us to move forward. And so now going into this, right now, we're about $17 million ahead of the 2021 budget, which started in July 1 fiscal budget. And that is a good omen in my view. But we've got to recognize that it was a very conservative budget. So it's not surprising we'd be ahead of budget by that much. But still, I believe, I'm on finance committee, a new member, but we should be able to ride that plus that surplus out to the end of this fiscal year. And if that's the case, then finance committee will make a recommendation, council, public works, the different departments will inform, because if we wind up with that sort of surplus, what do we do with it? And do we look at each project? Because those public works projects that we've deferred, they haven't gone away. They're still there. They still need to be done. So then, public works needs to sort of rank and order those things and bring that to council, and we can decide, how much of that surplus do we want to spend on which items we've deferred. And so that's sort of the basic plan of it. So we're strong. That's my main point, is that because of the property tax, and sales tax has remained fairly strong. We're ahead by, I think, 4% of our budget. And the TOT is down, and for obvious reasons, and this is mainly due to the hotels and really probably more to the last lockdown or the last, stay-at-home order really crushed the overnight industry, if you will. Yeah. So those things, but altogether, we're doing very well compared to a city like Anaheim. It's just all tied into the tourism generating from Disneyland. Doesn't have nearly the sales tax revenue, the property tax revenue that we do. So what major capital expenditure projects are we going to see going on in the next 12 months in the city? Well, we just broke ground a few weeks ago on the fire station, the old Lido Fire Station, which is right off close to the Lido Isle Bridge, and now it's going to be on the boulevard there, basically where the old McDonald's was on the peninsula. We bought that land several years ago, anticipating a new fire station. Estimated completion of mid-2022, and there's going to be a little bit of figuring out the name of it, whether it's the Lido Fire Station or the Cannery Fire Station, because it's the Cannery Village area. But this is something that was really needed because that old fire station was 60 years old, and just equipment and getting everything we need in a station to take care of that community, that particular area of service, it just was no longer viable. The new station will provide entry and exit for the trucks on going across both boulevards. So that allows that. So that's a real plus. And it's going to have a public restroom, which is great. I think every time we can sort of put one of those in somewhere in a public project, because they're so needed, but what we see in the summertime, particularly in the Balboa Peninsula. And it's about a $10 million project. And it's one of the projects we've gone out and borrowed money and put out some bonds, and we are looking at about a 1.7% interest rate on that money. So we have the money to pay for it, but council felt that, finance committee recommended, council felt that this would be a smart time to borrow this money at this low rate and keep the 10 million, keep our powder dry with 10 million in cash in reserves. So it's a really good project, and we're looking forward to it. It'll be a great community member, if you will, just having that presence. And it's going to be because of its location between incoming and outgoing, it's going to be a very big presence on the peninsula.
So what about the library lecture hall? Are we making any progress on that?
I think we are. I think the committee is changing it up a little bit. You know, these projects tend to grow a little bit as people get involved and they really come to terms with how they're going to be used and the what these facilities need. And then I think you look at, well, how can we leverage what we're going to do here into something better? And that leads to some creep in the project. So right now, that's what we're dealing with. Everybody agrees the library lecture hall is a great thing. And this is a public-private partnership. So the foundation, Library Foundation, working on it. And we'll be putting in some money and the foundation will be putting in some money. And we're trying to do this 50-50 partnership with public funds and private funds. And just rely on the foundation to go out to the community and sell the value of this project. And because of its proximity to the library itself, there's some opportunities with the courtyards and everything else to really add to it and add to the library and the rest of it. So it's another project that I think will move forward. And it's just a matter of I think, some more private fundraising and how much the council's ultimately willing to add to the project. These public-private partnerships are great and we want to do them, but when we had our planning session and then we look at the list of projects that we have to do going forward in the next 10 years, it's daunting. You know, it's sort of like the Balboa Island project, where we're going to completely redo the drainage of the island. So at high tide, we can pump into basically a basement, if you will, at the Collins Islands Bridge, and that water going out back into the ocean. And that is a huge project. That's going to be over $10 million. And then it's just multiples. So we have to really sort of be careful how far we get in. Sort of, there's these projects we'd like to have, and then projects that are really important to the community safety, if you will, new roads and all the rest of it.
How about the junior lifeguard headquarters? Are we making any progress there?
Absolutely, that's another foundation, and all of us are behind that. So the council is united behind both of these projects, there's no question about it. But you know, it's a question of how much can we get down to how much money we can advance toward these projects.
Yep.
And so junior lifeguard is very similar. They started with a relatively modest program initially, all of us looking at it, and then as more input was obtained, it's grown, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's a reset to whether we can, you know, get the funding to be able to achieve something that would really be optimal. And will we have to settle for less optimal? Maybe, I don't know.
So, you know, another big issue at the goal-setting session, and something that's a big deal in the city here for the next in the next year here, is the RENA numbers, the housing numbers mandated by the state. We have to have our housing element done by October of this year. We've got to find room for 4,834 units. So what can you tell us about what's going on with that effort and how we're doing on that?
Well, we're clearly, you know, under the gun with that deadline, and I don't know how many cities are going to meet that deadline, us included. But we've engaged the city, and we've met with residents about where this extra housing should go. And so each council district has had an opportunity to weigh in at meetings in their districts about their view on where this housing can go, not in their communities necessarily, but where in the city. And so those areas have been West Newport, Newport Center right here where we are, and Newport Coast, San Joaquin Hills area, and the airport. So those are the areas that we're looking at. But it's far from easy. It's not like we can just say to property owners, oh, okay, well, here's your zoning, we want you to build this. You know, it's just, we don't own the dirt, so we can't command people to build things. So ultimately, it's going to be done through incentivizing through, you know, zoning that allows the property to become more valuable by virtue of development. but the ratios of low-income housing to moderate-income housing that need to be built with these developments really cuts into the ability for a developer to pull it off financially. So there are many, many challenges to this. And I think this is going to play out on Newport's better suited to handle some of this than others, but it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in the coming years about compliance and how assumptions from the state are going to play out in the real world of cities, because each city has their own challenges with this sort of, top down. You've got a plan for this number of units, and have them done in 8 years, 10 years. So we're fully lit, and we fully intend to comply with what the state is demanding of us. But it's going to be really a challenge for us. And we need to do more outreach to residents. I think many people understand where we're going now in terms of we don't have much choice in this. I don't think anyone in this town says, oh yes, I'm for more density. No one wants more density, but this is our new reality that we're going to have to deal with. And that just begs the question, because at the same time, we're doing circulation element. We've got our circulation element in the general plan. And so how are we going to integrate this into that? So there's so much to it. And we need it to be successful. So that's the thing that for me, it's a little frightening, is that if we're under the gun and there's time pressure, what kind of development do you end up doing? It's so important that we do good development. Newport Beach style development. We've done a good job of protecting property values, protecting quality of life, because we have set the goals and set our parameters for development such that by far most of them are real pluses to the community, and it works well. But if we're under a hurry up mode and we have to build it, and I think that's the danger, is making sure that we get good projects that make sense, that where people want to live in these places, and the circulation works, and they're affordable. It's a story we're all going to be living with for the next 10 years, watching this play out. But we're going to see more infill for sure in these places that I just mentioned. There's going to be construction going on.
So a lot of folks see these accessory dwelling units. The state has allowed now that in single-family properties, you can build a small accessory dwelling unit in the backyard. You can attach it to the house, and a lot of folks see that as being a big part of the solution to the housing mandates by the state, and maybe a way to keep from having to overbuilding with too many bigger and denser buildings. What kind of role do you see the ADUs playing in all of this?
Well, we had a discussion last night at council, and planning staff thought that, conservatively, this ADUs might yield 170 units. And I think there might be more there, but since we've created, since the ADUs were mandated, and since the city has set up the process for getting an ADU permit and made it virtually no cost, we've only had about 20 ADUs built in the city. So it's a really tough problem, because if you have a single lot, so let's say your lot's 6,000 square feet and you've got a 2,000 square foot backyard, and you want to build an 800 square foot ADU, well, it's about $350 a foot to build an ADU, and then you're going to rent it out. How long is it going to take you to recover your investment? And then you've got, people living on your property, and maybe your concept of life in Newport isn't having tenants on your property. So it's not as easy as just building something. I think it works for people who currently have a rental, whether it's inside the home or outside the home, that is not conforming, that they could come out of the cold easily and get legal at very low cost. And then we could add that to our count. So I think there's opportunity there for the city to do a good program of going out and saying to people that are currently renting out units that are not permitted to get them legal. So that's an area. And I do think over time, though, the city will have more ADUs built. If they're built in conjunction with, on a larger lot with a bigger home, particularly in the Heights, what I've seen is, you've got alleys, so people are building garages and they put a unit over the garage, whether for their mother-in-law or their kids to come home to, and then maybe they eventually it becomes a rental unit. So they're part of the solution, but I don't think they're the 1,500, 2,000 unit solution to our mandate problem.
So another thing that was discussed at the goal setting meeting was code enforcement, and particularly a new program that I had never heard of called the Boardwalk Ambassador Program. So what can you tell us about just what we're doing overall in code enforcement, and then what the Ambassador Program is all about?
So code enforcement has really come to the fore in this year of the pandemic, with so many people coming to the beach, and of course our short-term rentals. And we've got to do something about it. And I think the majority of council would like to see more code enforcement, more investment in code enforcement. And I think everyone, that's the solution to that is not the police, because they've got much better things to do than try and catch a skateboarder on the boardwalk. So that's what that is about, is working with a private contractor to get people that are acting as ambassadors. They're wearing a bright shirt, and they're just out there, asking people to slow down, asking people to be respectful. And if they have a problem, they can reach out to the police to help with someone that's really off the track here. Going out to somebody at a fire pit that's not burning wood, they're burning plastic, whatever they're doing. So I think it's sort of a trial, if you will, but I think that contract, I think we'll see them this summer, and we'll see how that works. But it's a good thing. There's no question we need more code enforcement, but it doesn't mean that we need to involve the police necessarily in that more code enforcement. And our own code enforcement team, which is frankly already working a lot of hours out there trying to take care of it. We've got a really popular town, and we have so many visitors. So we've got to find other ways to protect the visitors and our residents from the folks that are not being good visitors.
So you guys spent some time talking about the new harbor department and staffing of the harbor department at the goal setting session. So what's going on in that area?
Well, we've got to spend some money and get more. We need a more robust harbor department for sure. So, and then how do we fund that? And Tidelands funds can go to that. So we'll do that. So I know our city manager Grace Young is going to, is putting forward a plan to increase the number of part-timers at the harbor department, and we'll try and get out there a little more. And everything's become more intense in this COVID world of ours. So the boats are noisier, the stairs are louder, and there's really a need for, again, sort of the ambassador approach of going up to people and saying, hey, be a good neighbor, be a good visitor, please slow down, please turn your music down. And so there's, I think, agreement on council to add more code enforcement on the harbor, which is expensive. And but I think the harbor, people see the harbor and the boats, but it's also community. There's 1,200 homes on the water in Newport Harbor, and we get lots of calls from those folks that are asking for some relief from sort of the craziness, if you will. 95%, just like everywhere else, 95% of people are great. And they come to our harbor, they respect it, they enjoy it. But we've got to be able to protect our harbor residents and the other boaters from folks that are acting out.
So one of the things that people come up to me and ask my opinion on is the dredging project in the harbor and the, I'm not exactly sure what it's called, the hole that's going to be there to put the non-suitable for ocean disposal material in.
Yeah.
So what can you tell us about that, and also, you know, to relieve any anxieties that some folks may have about taking that kind of approach to dredging?
Right. So the CAD is simply a depository, the giant hole dredged near the anchorage in the turning basin, and then our contaminated material would go into that, and then it would be covered over. That's as basic as I can say it. And so for a lot of people have concerns, and rightly so, they should be concerned about taking, because the harbor in different areas has contaminated material that we're not allowed to dump in the ocean. And so we then have, this process has happened in many other places, harbors, where you dig the hole and you put the contaminated material over it, and you cover it with good material, and it's inert, it's down there, it's not going anywhere, it's just there. And it saves a huge amount of money because otherwise you'd have to truck it. And it would take an incredible amount of truck trips to get that stuff to a site where you could get rid of it. So we are looking at dredging the harbor. The city won about $8 million in funds from the federal government after a couple years of trying toward dredging. And we've spent another $1.5 million in planning for the dredging. The Army Corps of Engineers are going to dredge the harbor mouth this year, and they're going to dredge up the reach from the sort of where the Balboa Yacht Club is up to where Buddy Upson's house used to be, right before you get to the ferry. So that's going to get dredged. And then this money is going to allow us to continue the dredging throughout the harbor and get our baseline down. Now we dredged, people say, well, you've dredged recently. Well, we dredged, I think it was 2012. And we have to, that didn't get us down to the level we should have gotten at, frankly. So we need to, and the harbor is gradually filling all the time. And so we've got to get that, we've got to get down to our depths in the harbor to protect it from filling up. So that we anticipate once this dredging work is done, will be good for many years to come, decades to come. So all in total, it's a $20 million effort. So the feds have put in 8, the city's going to put in 8, and then we're going to get, we put in another 1.5, so that's 16.5, and then we're going to round up some more money to finish it off and get it done. But the residents are very concerned about the CAD, and I understand that, and I get that. But we need to explain, we need to do a better job of explaining that this is safe and that it's the right thing to do. And so we've got to meet with folks one-on-one, and we have been, and there's some people that may never be satisfied, but ultimately it'll be council's decision as it comes up whether or not to do this. But you really have to look at the science of it and where it's been done before and look at that dispassionately. Because when people start throwing out, oh, you're putting polluted material in front of my house, well, no, it's not quite as, overt as that. We're protecting you from it. It's going into this. It's being captured, if you will.
So let's talk about a few other city issues here. Traffic, that's always a big issue in town, and probably, or arguably, I guess I would say, the biggest issue is the widening of Mariner's Mile, as to whether it should be widened or not. And then with that, there's various projects that are proposed on Mariner's Mile. They're primarily the one where the old Ardell boat brokerage and the Stuffed Shirt restaurant and the property on the other side of the highway are. So what's going on with all of that right now? Where do we stand in those things? Well,
there's some holdups on the project right now because of figuring out the traffic flow, the circulation around that project. And so it's going to happen. And I know a lot of residents in my district are not happy about this fairly large development going on in land that has been very underdeveloped for 50 years. So, and that's a loss to the community in some respects, because there's going to be some loss of view shed, and there's going to be increased traffic that may impact Newport Heights, and there's going to be some widening of Coast Highway. And by widening, I mean, in my view, from what I understand, is that this project will require decelerization lanes. So people coming along Coast Highway headed west, as they approach Ardell, the old Ardell property, they want to get to the right and turn right into the new development. They're going to have to add a lane there to allow that to happen. So just as we're closing for the Superior Bridge, same thing. So it's getting widened in spaces, Coast Highway, to allow for these developments to have safe exits and safe approaches. So that's the widening part. There's no effort to permanently widen the length of Coast Highway from Dover to, Superior, but there will be this widening to facilitate these projects.
So just moving on to another subject here, homelessness. The city's finalizing a deal with Costa Mesa for a homeless shelter. What can you tell us about how we're doing on that?
That's, we've got a deal with Costa Mesa, and it's about a $2 million deal. And it's gonna be about $1 million a year for those 20 beds. It's expensive, but it's not just beds, it's services. So it's important. It's an important part of the future solution, or at least management of our homeless situation. So that's it's something we really need to do, and this is just a first step. Ultimately, the goal is we need to build, I believe, in this town, a permanent home facility for people who are experiencing homelessness, and maybe eventually more of them. But we can't. The Costa Mesa shelter will be just as a temporary spot. It allows us to move people off, those people who are experiencing homelessness, whether they're at the pier or off of Newport Boulevard. We can actually physically take them and move them to the shelter, but they're only there for a few days. And the shelter is just that. It's not intended to be permanent. And then we can't hold them there against their will. They'll be back out on the streets again. And ultimately, we need to provide permanent supportive housing for these individuals. When I say we, I'm talking about our larger community. All of Orange County, all the cities need to partner in this. And maybe 2 cities go in on a permanent supportive housing facility. So it'd be like a small 50-unit housing development. And figuring out where that goes is, difficult, but that's the real solution to this. And it's going to be really expensive. And there's a number of NGOs that this is what they do. And so we have to partner with them. And we still need to partner with our houses of worship. I mean, they're a big part of this. And NGOs like Mercy House, churches, all of it. And there's many legs to this to make this work, to where we can get to where I don't think we'll ever have a solution to it, but we'll get it to where there's less of it, and what we're doing is humane, is the right thing to do to take care of people who are in this situation. One of my greatest disappointments of being on council is hearing from people who are just angry at the homeless, just furious at people who are in this situation where they have mental health issues, depression, whatever, and they have lost their job, or they haven't been working in 10 years, regardless of what it is. We need to help them. It's part of our civic duty. We need to help them. And so I think we've all got to pull pulled together. And I think we've got a lot of people in this town. I know this town has a big heart. And I think those people that see it from that perspective of that these people are not good people are the minority. I think our town's a very generous town, and they want to help. And if we could describe the way forward, which we're working on, for each resident to help in some way, that will go a long way toward it. So Costa Mesa Shelter was a big win for us. We're very appreciative of Costa Mesa for, joining with us or having us join them for this 20 beds. But this is just the start. And imagine 20 beds, $2 million, and $1 million a year. It's phenomenally expensive, but it's something we have to do. And then I say to people, what is the alternative? So it's as much a reality as RENA in terms of this is our mission the next 10 years.
So, in addition to traffic, the other big issue that I hear about a lot, it's always John Wayne Airport, always at the top of the list, what people are concerned about. And the Board of Supervisors just recently made a deal with the fixed base operators and how they're going to operate out of there. So how are things going out at the airport now?
Well, I mean, the biggest thing is we preserved for the FBOs, we preserved the times, so the curfew, and that was probably the biggest win. And I haven't followed the airport issue like other council members, like Diane Dixon, for instance, who was great with it, and as was Jeff Erdman, and now Noah Blom is involved, and he's already up to speed with it. So I always circle back to there's so much noise, and I understand the grief people are feeling. I hear the planes every morning from my house in the Heights. The most important thing we do is protect the agreement that we have. Allow no backsliding. Watch it like a hawk, because that agreement is unique, and it is always going to be, in my view, at risk of end-around runs in terms of noise, in terms of number of flights, in terms of flight patterns, and all the rest of it. So, and I know we've got lots of people working on it, not just from the city, but people from the county, and also our residents. People are on it. So, I think every year the number of flights, allowed flights based on population, can go up, and we can't force the planes to do that rapid ascent. That some airlines are more willing to do it than others, but we just have to keep after it. It's just another thing that is going to be a constant. The airport's not going to go away, and hopefully over time, airplanes get quieter, which will happen. But obviously, if you're living in Newport Beach now and you're in your 60s, that's not a lot of comfort, because you want relief from this now. And I get that. And certainly all of us on council are totally aligned with doing whatever we can. And we've proven it by all the effort we've made over the years to deal with the airport, particularly this last go around. I mean, we were really involved with that.
Well, we're running just about out of time here, but we do have time for a couple more questions. And I guess one thing I would ask you is, we talked about the mayor's position, and it's ceremonial, but it is also more than ceremonial. A lot of things that a mayor can do. So what are your personal goals that you'd like to accomplish this year as mayor? Anything that really sticks out in your mind?
For the city? I mean, in terms of
things you would like to see accomplished in your term as mayor. I'd like to put a done stamp on.
There's so many things that's a little frustrating that don't get done in a year, but I'm concerned about, as I mentioned, the RENA and the quality of development that will go forward. And so I'm going to be on council for the next 4 years. I don't see too much I can get done in the 1 year or be a part of, but certainly this year be a part of the discussion about RENA and just sort of bird dogging this issue of doing good development. not because this is a time when it's an opportunity for some folks to kind of cash out at Newport Beach and not give us the sort of quality development we'd like. And I think we have to demand from any development, in all development, that it's good stuff. And I know most developers want that and part of the marketplace, but I think we have a bigger obligation to the community. We're obviously, all of our villages and our neighborhoods are not being affected by this directly, in their neighborhoods, but still, this is a huge deal for this town to build that many units. And even though they're not built in our communities, they are going to be here and a part of us going forward. And it's going to be, if it's done well, I think it'll add to the town. And if it's not done well, it's going to hurt us. So that's a big one. The other one, to the degree that I can, I definitely want to help with the homeless situation. So I think that's a pressing need. I don't think it's a moral issue for us as a community, especially a community like this that has so much. We need to really do everything we can and to provide services and give people opportunities to get out from under this very serious cloud that's over their lives. So that's number two. And my passion, of course, is the harbor. So the dredging project is something that I'm definitely behind and want to see done. And, Councilmember Duffield's been leading this charge, and I've been happily been, going with him. I've made a couple of trips to Washington, D.C. to pound the halls of Congress to get money, and I think ultimately we were successful with getting the $8 million, and so that's, that's going to make the dredging possible. It's going to take a little more effort to get it fully funded, but it's one of those things that most people don't see, but it's critical to the health of the harbor in terms of the environment, the water flow, in terms of navigation for all vessels, in terms of going, a number of storms coming through over a period of years, filling up the harbor. Will have runway in terms of a deep harbor to accommodate that. And that's really important because, as most people know, if we have a harbor that's silted up and the navigation becomes difficult for an average sized vessel, it's going to be a big issue. And it takes forever to get dredging going. It's something that has to be planned. It's done by the Army Corps of Engineers, it's federal agencies, and so you've got to be ahead of it all the time.
Well, we have time for one last question, and you lived here most of your life. You've had your career here, and you're now retired, and you're on the city council. So what is your vision for the future of the city? And I guess I would ask you, in your vision, how would you describe the city 20 years from now? What do you see it being in 2041?
Well, I see it'll be bigger. I mean, every day, more square footage is being built in Newport Beach, whether it's a house remodel or, addition somewhere, new building. It's, the planning department it's really something how much they're processing all the time. And why is that? Because we're so successful. Because Newport Beach, if you're going to buy a home anywhere, and as an investment or a place to live, what better place than here, really? And so there's an awful lot of pressure. And that brings businesses, and just success kind of builds on success, and that's what's been happening here since World War II. I mean, since the beginning, even before World War II, when Al Soiling came down on the red car and saw Balboa, saw the ocean on one side and the mud flats on the other in the harbor, it just struck him. He was the Commodore Newport Harbor Yacht Club, the first Commodore Newport Harbor Yacht Club. It just struck him as this was an incredible place. And it was a place for him to invest in, which he did immediately. And he was part of the charge to dredge the harbor and get that going. And that Newport started on the peninsula. It's called East Balboa, East Newport. So the future, I think, is bright. I mean, how can it not be in a town like this? I think we're going to see more traffic. We're going to see more square footage built. It's just part of what this town is about. This is not a no-growth town. Never has been. It's not Laguna Beach, it's not Marin. And so on some level, we need to accept that. But then at the same time, so we still have to be providing respite from it, right? So that's parks, maintaining our 64 parks, adding to those parks where we can, which we do through development agreements, and maintaining the beach and maintaining public spaces so people kind of get out from this growth, if you will, of more and more people. And we're going to see changes. I think Newport Center will change drastically, actually, over the 20 years. We'll see probably more residences there, and we'll see a different combination mix of entertainment venues and some fewer big box stores just because of what's happening with Amazon and all the rest of it. I think our villages will continue to support local businesses, and we're always reinventing ourselves. And so Newport will be not too different in 20 years, I don't think. The harbor will look, that's one thing, the harbor virtually looks the same, to me. It's the same place I was sailing as a kid. And the town is too, in a big way. So, because I think it has to do with the ocean being so close by, the quality of the light. There's other things that are involved with the town just being a great place. It happens to be situated geographically in an incredible environment. It's just amazing when you think about it. It's just not the ocean. It's looking at Saddleback, looking at the mountain ranges when there's snow on the mountains on a clear day. It's just a phenomenal location. So it's ours to screw up, and I don't think we're going to let that happen because everyone's so invested, not only economically, but emotionally in this town. And we know growth is coming. So what's the deal? We need to manage growth. And how do we do that? Well, we get informed by residents, and they come to our council meetings, and they're not happy with a particular project, particular growth, and we have to deal with that. And we need to try and make it better. We need to try. It's got to work for people. Every development has to work for people from every side, for the people who live there, for the people who look at that building, all of it. So fortunately, we've had some good partners in this community doing that kind of development. So it's a bright future as far as I'm concerned. It's a phenomenal town.
It is.
And it's been an honor for me to be on council and to be the mayor. It doesn't feel quite real because it's such a spectacular town, and it's just a real honor to be a part of what I call what's next.
Well, Brad, thanks a lot for participating in our webinar today. And this was supposed to be our 40th anniversary of the Mayor's Dinner. Speak Up Newport's been doing this for 39 years. So we're looking forward to putting on an event later on in the year and having you back and recognizing the former mayors as well and all the networking that goes on. And hopefully we'll turn the corner on COVID and be able to have a great event later in the year. But in the meantime, thanks so much for joining us, and we really appreciate it.
Thanks, Ed. It's been good. Thank you very much.
So everyone, thank you for joining us this afternoon. Be sure and watch out for the announcements for our next webinar. It'll be Zoom again in March, March the 10th, and our subject's going to be code enforcement. So until then, stay safe and be well. And good afternoon.